All right. Welcome back, everybody. Can you hear me?
Thanks. Yes, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay, cool. All right, and welcome to those of us who are joining for the first time. I'm Matt Speltz, and I'll be moderating tonight's follow-up Q&A session for the 25-26 Millburn Charter Study Commission. The five commissioners, Chris Drucker, Vice Chair Corey Biller, Jerry Kong, Joanna Parker-Lance, and Chinook Tana, were elected last November to study Millburn's existing township form of government. After spending 5 months conducting interviews and holding public meetings, they voted unanimously to recommend a change to our local government structure. That change will be on the ballot for Millburn voters to decide on June 16th, which is a Tuesday. If you missed last week's webinar, this recording is available at millburncharter.org. Tonight, we'll do a 10-minute recap for anyone who missed it, and then we'll go straight to questions, including many that came in after last week's session. We want to make sure no question goes unanswered before we get to next Tuesday. So if you have any questions, please drop them into the chat. Drucker, or take it away.
All right. Thanks, Matt, and welcome Millburn Township residents. Again, my name is Chris Drucker, and I chaired the commission. Last November, 65% of Millburn voters chose to form the Charter Study Commission. After 18 public meetings and more than 40 structured interviews, our commission found that Millburn is a great town, but held back by an outdated government structure. That's why we made a recommendation for change. And please, folks, I'm ad-libbing here. Please do not take all the noise. Take the noise out of everything, and please just look at the facts. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. All right, so as we said, for those of you guys who missed last week, we're going to go over the short version. What are the core problems on how Millburn is governed right now?
I can take that. I think to me it can be summarized in four main issues. One is term length. The other is unaffiliated voters are effectively shut out of our process. The third is partisan elections that allow for interference from special interests. And I think the fourth is that our council is unfortunately too small now to effectively govern or optimally govern. And I'll take them in turn. The term length, what I talk about the term length is the 3-year terms are too short and elections are too frequent. The annual election cycle, from what we've heard, we interviewed both Republican and Democrat council members all the way back to 1991. And they found that the annual election cycle with 3-year terms was disruptive and didn't allow for accountability. Frankly, they felt that its potential that it made it difficult for people to determine who is responsible for what. They described that projects such as the town hall renovation, the addition of new fields for the kids, for the rec, the Taylor Park Gateway project, the renovation of the streets in downtown are just few of the examples, specific examples of projects that took too long or were stopped midway because of a 3-year cycle where people would get adjusted, learn get their bearings the first year, start really getting projects going their second year, and then the third year they're effectively have 1 foot in and 1 foot in the election cycle and trying to run for re-election. It also created for annual political fighting with battles of lawn signs and social media toxicity, which isn't good for our community, having elections every single year where this it doesn't allow for healing after these very contentious battles. The second issue that I mentioned, the unaffiliated voters that are effectively shut out. This to me, as part of the research, was shocking. It's our current electorate in Millburn, of the electorate, 43% of Millburn voters are registered as unaffiliated. And with a partisan election, the way it's structured, it's effectively impossible for somebody who is a part of that almost half the population of our town to run and volunteer and become a council member. There has never been an independent person ever elected to the Millburn Township Committee. And we have some of the brightest and most talented people in our township. We are wasting our own resources 43% of our resources by effectively excluding them in our partisan election system. The other thing about the partisan election system is that it more easily allows for interference from special interests. The partisan election structure invites pressure from both the state and the county officials on decisions that they should not be involved in. And it dissuades good, qualified people from stepping up because they're just sometimes afraid of being beholden to a party agenda. This is not bald fear mongering that we've seen from the No campaign. This issue is backed by fact. It is backed by specific examples that have occurred in Millburn under the current system. During our interviews with former TC members, we heard about pressure from both county and state party leaders on whom to hire and how to vote. Indeed, I will give you a specific example. In September 2022, a former township committee member and mayor wrote a public letter disclosing pressure from her own party, from county and local party, from her own party, from the county and state level to award township contracts based on their pressure. It is what caused her to drop out of the party because she was tired of that pressure. This isn't hypothetical. It's a public letter. It's ready for anyone to review. It has been out there. Also in the framework of this, and even the bigger, the national polarized political culture where voters tend to vote based on party affiliation, local partisan elections more easily allow for intrusion of special interests because the party leaders choose local candidates who follow their own agenda and pressure. Millburn does not have an open primary where you can sign up as a Democrat or Republican and you can have a primary and see who the voters want to choose as their party representative. In Millburn, the local parties choose based on their interests and their agenda who is going to be on the ballot. So when they say there's lack of transparency, I would argue that it's the exact opposite. You don't know who you're actually voting for because somebody else chose it. Moving on from partisan politics, the council, based on our interviews, is just too small at this point. It's currently 5 people. It's a 5-person governing body. Right now, it's a town of 22,000 people. That number has grown from when it was first established. We have a $75 million budget. What we've heard is that the workload, quite frankly, is too high for just 5 people during a 3-year term. There isn't enough institutional knowledge. There isn't enough time. This is really a volunteer job. And we've heard that people are spending 25 hours of their week on just local politics that they volunteered for. The other thing about a 5-year council is it restricts debate because in New Jersey, we have an Open Public Meetings Act. And so you can't have any voted on commission, committee, group of people cannot act without a public meeting if in a majority. So when you have 5 people, that means that no more than 2 people can speak to each other about a topic without having an open public meeting. With 7 people, you can have more people talking about issues outside of the standard township council meetings, which will allow for more intense discussion and debate and sharing of ideas. So that is just a summary of things. I tried to keep it brief because I know that we want to get to questions. But so that's the summary of the big issues.
All right. And then on the other side of the coin, what's going well with the current system?
I can take that. Look, in our research, the unequivocal answer to that question was that our system of professional management is working well. The business administrator has provided continuity through all this churn. It's an appointed professional who manages day-to-day operations. The continuity of professional management is reflected in just 2 people having served this position for over 40 years. That has given a strong financial management. It's one of the biggest reasons for our AAA bond rating. And this arrangement exists only because the township committee chose to pass an ordinance that kind of mirrored the council manager form of government that we are recommending. So that's the continuity part. But note that in the future, a committee could eliminate that arrangement through a simple majority vote. So it's not on a strong structural platform right now.
Okay, so folks, why don't you walk us through the recommendations and why you think it'll fix many of these issues?
I'll take that. We are recommending a council manager form of government. There will be a 7-person council elected through nonpartisan elections. Terms are every 4 years and staggered so that there are elections every other year. The same professional management that worked for 41 years will be protected by state law rather than local ordinance. The business administration position becomes township manager. Similar to today, the manager is appointed by and serves at the pleasure of the council. There will also be new initiative and referendum powers for residents. Folks, Alex McDonald, everyone loves him. He's our business administrator. His title is just going to be changed. And what we are suggesting when this passes, it more than solidifies his position.
So the council manager, just to piggyback on what you're saying, it ensures that the professional management can't be undone by the future whims of a township committee. So the stability of the professional management in town is something that has worked out well, and we all acknowledge that position is great. We chose the form of government that keeps that arrangement. It's just under a different name, township manager rather than the business administrator. So it's not a foreign, concept. We're already paying market rates for town managers, so there wouldn't be any change regarding cost. Increasing from 5 to 7 people will help lighten the workload per council member. As I always say, many hands make light work. It will also allow better representation through more diverse perspectives and additional brainpower for tough decisions. So there's a lot to get done on the council, is what we've learned. And having more members allows for better distribution of the expertise. And under the Sunshine Law, as Corey mentioned, a 5-member body is limited to one-on-one conversations outside of public meetings, because the majority is 3, so 2 can only appear in private. A larger body allows subcommittees of 3, making it easier to get real work done and have productive conversations and discussions. So a larger body is more resistant to outside pressure also, which is due to the added diversity of perspectives. Another thing that's worth repeating, council members are paid a stipend of $7,500 per year. That's less than minimum wage when you account for the amount of hours they've put in. Adding 2 more council members will cost us 68 cents per resident annually. It's well worth it, in my opinion, and in our group's opinion, for the additional set of eyes on the budget.
I will also sorry, Joanna.
Yeah.
I was going to touch on that 68 cents. Yeah, that's also speculative, because the amount that the council members currently make are based on sort of local ordinance. And so in actuality, if there are 7 members on a committee, they can decide, because there's more members and the work is distributed more broadly, they can decide to reduce their stipend to $5,000, which would then reduce the cost per household. So number one, the amount is essentially nothing to begin with, and it could even go down. And with more people on the board, Joanna's point is a good one. You have more thought into the budget, and maybe they find budget savings. So I don't think cost is an actual issue.
I think one way to summarize that is there's nothing more expensive than a bad decision. And if you have fewer people, you're more likely to end up with a bad decision.
I just want to expand on the nonpartisan piece a little bit. That's somehow being has gotten a lot of the attention, a lot of chatter about it. So recommending nonpartisan elections removes primary elections. It removes the party organization from voting a candidate for local office. Candidates run exactly like the Board of Education election runs today. You get on the ballot by collecting signatures. Slates will be allowed. Candidates can still run together. And experience from other nonpartisan town shows that cross-party slates are also commonly seen. What changes is that nobody else is picking the candidates, or there's no party influence in who ultimately we get to vote on. The opposition has said that this makes it less transparent, and I did argue the opposite. When you have a party label, candidates seem to have less of an incentive articulating their position on local issues, since they are counting on party line voting to get elected. Non-partisan elections will mean every candidate has to engage, has to say why they're running, what issues they're standing on, and so on and so forth. Um, and in our interview with the mayor of Verona, who is an unaffiliated voter, he said it leads to better civic engagement. Residents will know who they're getting. Nothing about public accountability changes. Voter registrations and campaign contributions remain public record. We cannot, or could not, as Charter Commission, we could not have made rules about, hey, a candidate cannot take party funding, or parties cannot endorse any candidates. And remember, party affiliations are public record in New Jersey. So it doesn't mean you're not going to know what the affiliation of the person is. You can just simply look it up. They just can't campaign on the party platform. So this idea that removing party affiliation creates a lack of transparency is simply wrong. What it does do is gives unaffiliated candidates an equal chance to viably run and get elected. It treats everybody the same on the ballot, and that matters in terms of the pool of candidates, right? It's going to encourage more people to come forth and run.
And before I make a comment about the longer term lengths and the elections every other year, rather than the 3-year term lengths and the annual elections that we currently have, I just wanted to re-emphasize, other than the 2 additional council members, there are no net new positions getting added. So the business administrator position is replaced with the town manager position, and there's 0 added bureaucracy, and there's no tax impact. The de minimis amount of 2 additional stipends, which can be adjusted downward, will have no tax impact. So let me just repeat that.
Can I just clarify, just a change in name of the business administrator position, right? There's nothing,
Correct.
practically speaking, we don't think anything is changing there at all.
Correct. And we're already paying market rate, as Joanna said earlier. So let me just repeat that. There is no added bureaucracy, and there is no tax impact on the changes. The 4-year term with staggered elections every 2 years, that directly addresses some of the issues that we saw with burnout and the projects that never get finished. So during our interviews, we found that the 3-year term just simply really only gives people 1 effective year to govern if they're only serving 1 term, and that's their 2nd year. So this would give council members additional breathing room, get additional projects under their belt, make them comfortable to run for re-election, not have them be burned out. And this gives them the time to gain the necessary expertise to become effective. So the other things that are part of the recommendation are part of any Faulkner Act form of government. So the council manager form we're recommending, which falls under the Faulkner Act, means that direct democracy powers of initiative and referendum would be granted. And that's part of the Faulkner Act change. So what that means is that if residents want something done via local ordinance that the council hasn't acted on, because they have chosen not to, or they're too busy looking at other things. So something like improving parks or playing fields, residents can gather signatures and get it put directly on the ballot for a referendum. And that same process works in reverse if the residents wish to oppose an ordinance. For example, if there's a development or land use issue that they disagree with, they can collect signatures and then force a public vote on it. So if the council manager form is adopted, these tools are also useful as a pathway to modifying some of the structural elements of the recommendation. So for example, if in the future residents wanted to go from nonpartisan to partisan elections, that can be put to a vote. If they wanted to change the size of the council from 7 to 5 or 7 to 9, they can do the same with that. Or if they wanted to allow direct election of the mayor. So it's important to emphasize that the initiative and referendum powers give us flexibility with regard to the structure within council manager, but we don't have any of that flexibility if we stay with our current form.
Jerry, I think that's worth hammering home a little bit more, is that, if the vote is yes, there is some who try to argue that this is catastrophic, it's there's just a lot of I'll say fear mongering out there. I think it's important to note that one of the benefits of the Faulkner Act forms of government is if something's not working, it can be changed. So, for example, let's take one of the hot topics, the nonpartisan elections. If we were to move to nonpartisan elections and find that for some reason it's causing significant disruption in our township, we could change that aspect of it. It gives us flexibility. So I just want people to understand that as well, is that, look, this isn't, hey, once we change, we're locked in for decades like we are now.
And actually, that's a great segue to something that I have researched but have not actually mentioned before. There are towns that currently have nonpartisan elections. So West Windsor, their mayor council. So just to be upfront about it, West Windsor's mayor council, they've had nonpartisan elections since 1993. A group of residents put together a initiative and put on the ballot to switch from their nonpartisan elections to partisan elections. And this actually happened pretty recently in 2024. And just to give a sense of how popular nonpartisan elections are for people that live under that system, that initiative, meaning they kept nonpartisan elections, that initiative was defeated by 2/3 of the people. So 66% of the people in West Windsor, which currently has nonpartisan elections, chose to stay with their nonpartisan elections. So all of the folks out there, saying that nonpartisan elections are the end of the world, well, the people that actually live under that system, they prefer it 2-1. So that's just something to keep in mind.
But I think the fact that there's flexibility and if people are uncomfortable with change in general. And if they want something to change because they didn't like how this went, they have the ability to make this happen, versus if we have a no, we don't have the ability to go to any other form of government. No one can even suggest it to be researched for another 10 years.
Yeah. Well, the one flexibility we do have under Township Committee is we can reduce 5 members to 3 members, which everyone has universally said is a terrible idea. So essentially, we have no flexibility.
All right, guys, thanks for the recap. Let's move on to questions, as many of them came over the last week, and I see some more coming to the chat here. Question 1. The no side has stated that the proposal is bigger, less transparent, more expensive. How do you guys respond to that?
I'm happy to respond to the first part there. Bigger, yes. 7 is definitely bigger than 5. But 5 seems insufficient to get all the work done. The benefits of 7, as we have thought of, quorum, subcommittees of 3 makes it better. We have experienced the group of 5, and we understand the difficulties behind the scenes of communicating with 2 people. When you get a group of 3, at least you have a healthy debate and you can actually keep each other a bit more on track and get to your decisions better, quicker.
And can I add, Joanna, that bigger is only as it relates to the membership of the council. The size of the government itself, our employees, our departments, none of that is changing. This is just how people going to 7. So the legislative body that's changing, nothing else. I don't know what that really means.
And actually, in fact, because this reminded me of something when Joanna and I had interviewed the manager in, I think it was Mountain Lakes, Joanna.
Yes.
Mountain Lakes has, I believe, 7 people on their council, and they have a smaller government than we do because they don't have an assistant manager. I remember the manager there was, talking to Alex McDonald when we did the co-interview with him, and he was saying, "Oh, Millburn has a business as assistant business administrator." So even though Mountain Lakes has 7 people, their bureaucracy is smaller than our existing 5-person township committee bureaucracy.
And they're actually a smaller town than us, and they have 7 people. Yeah. And their meetings, they were telling us how quickly and efficiently they go through all the agendas and everything's, it just seems to work really beautifully. So we found it kind of inspiring. We also thought that, more diversity, more representation. I like the idea of more eyes on the budget. We thought that it's worth it for the de minimis increase, and it can be reduced to account for lighter workload.
Right.
So that's for the future. More mentorship opportunities. That's the other thing we learned from some of the other interviews, that there's the ability for the outgoing members to mentor the new people as they come in, because there's more people. At this point, what we did hear in the past from the past interviews are like, nobody really mentored me. There wasn't enough time. We kind of all jumped into things because everyone was busy. So we're hoping that, adding 2 more people will allow for, and adding the slightly longer term will allow for people to learn more and be better mentors for their new people coming in.
We already answered more expensive, right? 68 cents a resident.
Yes, per resident. Yeah.
It's $15,000 on a $75 million budget, maybe is what we have.
Yeah, that's right.
That's really more expensive. Is not a criticism at all. And less transparent. I don't know how transparency changes, to be honest, in this new structure. If it is referring to party labels, I already said that party affiliations is public information. So I don't know. Nobody's going to hide their party affiliations. It's about just not running on a party platform, and it's not being subject to the party high command saying literally who can run. So anyways, that's the answer to the first question.
And actually, let me just make a point. Like, if, party label isn't the end all be all for information, right? Like, you could have, moderate Democrats, you can have more extreme Democrats. And just because someone has a Democratic label next to their name, you don't really know what they stand for anyway. Like, you really need to talk to the candidates and understand what their position is on local issues. And even when you try to take the national political mapping and map it onto local issues, like, it's not even clear what those mean. And, in our interviews, folks weren't able to articulate, how running a small town of 22,000 people, it would be different between a Democrat or a Republican.
And many voters already split their vote across party lines. We have seen that here in Millburn, where we have a Democrat and Republican got elected in the last cycle. We saw the vote share of the governor was much higher than the vote share of the local Democratic candidates. So people are voting for individuals in a big way too. So this is about making sure unaffiliated candidates have an equal shot at running viably, and encouraging a wider pool of candidates to come and volunteer to serve.
Well, can I bring that up? Another point that we talked about last time, but in case people didn't watch that video and aren't going to, but are watching this one, the idea that, the unaffiliated gets the representation. Some people are like, well, people will hide behind the unaffiliated and not really tell you, who you are, and you don't know. And maybe you were once this and you become something else, and then you are just suddenly unaffiliated. So the concern with that, for some people, it isn't so much like, oh, I'm hiding behind a non-label. There are some people who have jobs who cannot be affiliated with one side or another and run for candidacy. So, and expect to win. So, we've already realized that an independent is not going to win locally. I know some people say, oh, they can, but in reality, they can't.
Theoretically, they can. Reality, they cannot.
Yeah, I mean, of course they can physically, and they're capable of running. But when your company says to you, you can't run as an R or a D, then you're like, okay, well then I can't run. So it's unfortunate for people to feel left out, and the fact that there's 43% of unaffiliated, that's really what got me to be convinced of it, and it was a Democrat from Red Bank that drove up, who was part of the charter commission study, and then he eventually got elected. He said he felt irresponsible. Their town is largely Democratic, and they had 46% unaffiliated, and he felt irresponsible not voting, in favor of changing it to nonpartisan, and that he really spoke to me. I heard him loud and clear.
And Joanna, I think it's important to note that committee person is actually also a member of their local Democratic committee. And he said that when the township decided to go to nonpartisan elections, both the Democratic committee, the local Democratic committee, and local Republican committee agreed that they would not interfere with local elections, that they would only be involved in up ballot tickets. So, I've heard from some people, well, even if you have nonpartisan elections, the parties can get involved. Parties want to get involved and ruin a good thing. I suppose they could, but that's their choice. And I got a question, Why would they get involved other than to promote some sort of interest that they have instead of listening to the voters and letting them have a nonpartisan election system? I would also say about, one of the things that's being pushed is that the partisan system allows for more transparency and information because you can tell what somebody's about with a label, whether Democrat or Republican. I will tell you, I think it's not necessarily the case because people can hide behind party labels. Like I said, the parties choose the candidates. So, a lot of people, especially, and I said this earlier, we live in a polarized national political climate, especially when it comes to local elections. People have done so much research and put so much effort into learning about candidates on the up ballot. They tend to probably not do as much research to do on their local elections, and they just vote for a candidate based on D or R and whatever's next to their name. I will tell you that we have had a lot of people elected simply because of their party affiliation, and they weren't qualified at all, and they've done some damage to the town. Just anecdotally, I was saying that I went to a candidate forum a few years ago to learn more about the candidates, and I asked one of the candidates, "Hey, so can you tell me what topics you want to address and what you think the issues in the town are?" And this person said to me, "Well, I don't think that's a fair question. I haven't governed before. I haven't been on the township committee." And I was just flabbergasted. And that's and that person was ultimately elected. So, because of a party label, people who have no experience with the township, no motivations to do better for the township and transparent motivations going in can and have been elected. So I would say that, I understand in concept it might tell you a little bit about the underlying rationale of a person, but it doesn't tell you about their qualification. I would say, we have had an effective Board of Ed, and those are non-party elections. And so I don't think the party label in and of itself is too valuable to try going away from.
Should we go to the next one?
Let's go to the next question. Okay. Question 2. I received a mailer that claims that the proposed government structure promotes chaos, higher taxes, dysfunction, and has a lot of scary headlines about places like West Orange, Trenton, Jersey City, and Hillside. Can you please explain this?
I'm happy to take that one. So this is something the opposition has tried to scaremonger people with. So West Orange is mayor council, Trenton is mayor council, Jersey City is mayor council, and Hillside is also mayor council. It's very interesting that they're choosing all of these mayor council examples when that is not the form of government that we recommended. We recommended council manager. Mayor council you'll generally see in much larger cities. And that form of government has a directly elected, strong executive mayor. And there's some balance of power there where the executive mayor has to compromise with a legislative council. And the council holds the purse strings generally. So we're not recommending a mayor council. We are not recommending the forms of government that West Orange, Trenton, Jersey City, and Hillside have. The one thing that is the same is nonpartisan. Now, I don't think that nonpartisan is the cause of all the issues that those other municipalities are facing. I think there are other issues there. And let me just be clear. So council manager, we are proposing an elected council that serves the legislative function. The council appoints the manager who serves as the executive. And this model is based off of corporate governance. And it's basically exactly the same way how we are currently running our township committee, where committee members essentially serve a legislative function and they've offloaded the executive functioning to the business administrator. So I guess in terms of the chaos, higher taxes, and dysfunction, I don't see where chaos would come from. Higher taxes we've already talked about ad nauseum.
Well, I mean, Jerry, I mean, and taking that point is, I don't think we can point to the election structure as the reason for chaos in Trenton and Jersey City. Frankly, Trenton, Jersey City, and West Orange have very little, if anything, from a structural, from a demographic, from a size, from anything to Millburn. So it's a false comparison. It's a red herring, frankly.
Yeah.
Our recommendation, as you know, we interviewed people from townships that are most similar to ours so that we can have an actual comparison. So Ridgewood, Red Bank, Verona, by example. Ridgewood has been operating under the nonpartisan council manager since I think it was 1970 and has a AAA bond rating for more than 10 years. Verona, which quite frankly, if you watch some of the meetings where we interviewed their mayor, kind of seems like Disney World. It's amazing how they operate. They've been operating under nonpartisan council manager since 1986. They've engaged they have a very engaged populace. That's what I'm saying in like a Disney World-esque kind of. I'm jealous of how engaged their populace is, and they do really focus on the council races. Red Bank was the most recent town in New Jersey to transition to the nonpartisan council manager in 2023. And from what we interviewed two members of their Democratic committee who happened to also be on their charter study commission, and then subsequently were elected after the change in their form of government to their town council. We interviewed actually one of them twice, once separately and once at a public meeting. The other one we interviewed during a public meeting, and Joanna mentioned this, and he was so interested in it, he actually came back to some of our other public meetings to help contribute and give his experience. And what he described, what they both described, was just a really smooth transition, increased accountability. They no longer experience the bitter divisiveness in annual partisan elections. One of the guys was saying how his neighbor is a known Republican, he's a known Democrat, and sort of that sort of underlying tension that would happen around election time doesn't happen anymore. Apparently, he was telling a story. I think it went something along the lines that their Republican neighbor told him like that he happily voted for him, and look, you never know these things, but he said just the vibe, the culture, that everything around their elections has changed so much going to nonpartisan, and the fact, quite frankly, the parties agreed to lay down their swords from a local election perspective.
All right, we'll jump to the next question. Okay, so how does this impact our standing in Essex County, since it's such a political county where a majority of the funding goes to the Democratic Party in major cities?
So it's interesting. I can take this. That was one of the questions I had concerns with, frankly, going in. Is like, hey, if we are to feel that the township, the Essex County is very involved in politics and things like that, will that translate into reduced funding and bonds and things like that? And in fact, so we researched the issue and we found that interestingly enough, the converse seemed to be true, is that the townships with nonpartisan elections seem to receive higher amount of funding than those with partisan elections. And I'm not trying to say that there's a connection there that somehow for some reason nonpartisan means you're getting higher contributions or funding. I don't think that's the case, but the point is that we are not going to lose funding if we move.
But they're not getting punished.
Yeah.
There's no correlation there. That's what we're trying
Right.
to say, that it doesn't really matter to the
I think Verona, which has fewer people than us, I think it's 14,000. They got twice as much grant funding in the latest round of community development block grants. So I think the point is, going to nonpartisan, we shouldn't be afraid that our county grant funding is going to disappear.
Right.
All right. This one was asked by several people. Why was June 16th chosen to be election day? Why was it not earlier or later?
Can I take this one?
Yeah, and Joanna, I will definitely contribute as well, because you and I kind of had a similar thinking. Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, we had real concerns about it. Probably for the same reasons that others out there have these concerns, but because we debated and discussed it, I think we got comfortable with it for several reasons. We weighed the pros and the cons. People could go back and watch that debate, and you and I agreed to the June 16th. 4 people would run simultaneously. would run simultaneously. Sorry, the cons of a November election, right? So let's go through the cons maybe. 4 people would have to run simultaneously with the referendum, which means the 2 Ds and the 2 Rs. And if it passes and the yes vote goes through, now their time and money would be completely for naught. That was one of our biggest concerns. And I believe one of the candidates who was running had just submitted, their application, came on that evening and said, thank you for your concern, but I'm still concerned. So, we just thought to waste 4 people's time, and now they have to rerun, because if the yes campaign happens, what's going to happen is everyone's got to rerun. So now everyone's doing the same campaign, and you have to go and run for the next potentially 6 months and have it another special election or the following November, right? Just seems an odd way to do this business. So coming to this vote, so it's confusing, right? To tell people to vote for township committee, but also consider changing to a council manager and then revoting in May. Like, it just seems so confusing and backward. And when you guys presented it that way, I think that's what got Corey and I on the page of, well, actually, then this is really important. It's imminent. And we were trying to choose the dates to make sure people aren't away on vacations yet. They're back from most of their college graduations. We do know the prom is happening. It totally stinks. But that's why we went on a very big campaign to try to help people get mail-in ballots. And if this vote was held November, an election would be necessary in May if passed. So it just, I don't know. Corey, do you have anything else?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I want to acknowledge that, yes, I had a concern with it going in. I still have a concern with it now, but nothing's perfect, unfortunately. And so if I'm weighing the pros and the cons, I think, Joanna outlined, I think, the cons pretty well. I think the pros outweigh the cons. It's like, look, the reality is that if you held it in November, it's to me super confusing, because you're asking people to vote on a change of form of government while also asking them to vote on potential council members for the current form of government. The amount of money and time spent campaigning for 4 people, 2 people would be elected, but 4 people would have to be running and campaigning. And so I don't think that's fair to them, because if it passes, they would then have to run again in May. Yeah. So then we'd have we'd have to nonetheless have a special election in May to elect 7 new people anyway. So I think between sort of the waste of having people having to run, the confusion, the idea that we'd have to have an election in May also, I think we decided this was the best of what's around, if you will. And we committed ourselves to provide as much information so that people could decide and, just go into the ballot box, vote early. And, unfortunately, look, I had a daughter who graduated last year, so I know the pressures of high school graduation and the prom and everything else like that. So I appreciate it. Unfortunately, we were sort of looking bigger picture and thinking of the residency in general and what was better overall for everybody. So, I am sorry about the timing. Unfortunately, there wasn't something that I thought was better, and so that's why we went with it.
Well, putting it in the middle of the summer would be terrible. And my point to all of you guys was, I know how hard it is to get Rocktoberfest committee heads, even, who really care about the event, where we raised $225,000 for the schools. So they really care because it's for their kids. They're like on vacation. And people don't care about a topic until it's last minute. We were talking about that with somebody at Sunny Scramble the other day. And it's like, they just don't care until the very end because people are super busy. So we also wanted to put a flashlight, a spotlight, really, not just a flashlight, a spotlight on this. And we thought if we created it as its own special election, it's so important for people to hear about this, the yeses, the nos, the pros, the cons, and having it as a single item became now, okay, this is actually really important. We should be focusing on this as a one issue election.
I think the alternative of having the new council elections in May, if it passed, I think that creates an ongoing cost, right? Because, it is possible to move the May elections to November, but if they don't get moved, depending on how the new council votes, now you have a recurring cost of May elections every single time, rather than this one special election. And the other thing that we heard from Red Bank is that they did the November coincide referendum. They had 2 people that were elected to serve the 6-month term, and they weren't reelected on the subsequent council when their government reformed. And those two people were actually doing damage within the existing form of government. They were just passing ordinances left and right and not actually thinking about the consequences. That all had to get unraveled when the new council came into office. So
But Liam,
this
that,
way is
yeah.
It was a
this way
cautionary
is
tale.
yes,
It was a
exactly.
cautionary tale.
Well, the other thing, by the way, is by aligning it to the election, the referendum election to this November, we're then setting up our local elections to be on a national election cycle, which going forward will be better for the township because it means that you're going to have more. You always have more participation for national elections. So going forward with our national elections aligned with local elections, we'll have more participation in local elections. So there's that benefit as well.
There is, but Corey, can I just really quickly point out, there are some people who are saying we specifically did this so we wouldn't have as many eyeballs on it because in November you'd have more eyeballs. But the problem is for us is we're trying to set this up for the future, not just for this vote, right? So we want people to have the eyeballs. I think we've plenty spread it out. I think people are talking about it. I think having the yes and no signs out there gets people to have the conversations and watch these things and talk.
Yeah, but I think that's also an example of there's nothing perfect. And I said, I'm not denying that there are pros for having this referendum election in November.
But then you say failure later.
Ultimately, it came down to, in my mind, there are more pros to having it in June than in November. So, yeah.
And let me just add, we had all of this discussion in public at our second to last meeting of the Charter Commission. So if folks are interested, you can watch I think it's a 2-hour recording of all of why we determined this date made sense.
Not only in public, but with the ability for the public to contribute and opine and have their say.
And the date was simply math. It was 60 days after we adopted the report. So I know we could not have had it sooner. Legally required to have 60 days. I know it was said. I just want to emphasize that. So there was no magic to the date. We didn't want it later because people would be on vacations, as Joanna said before. So
and Tuesday, because people vote on Tuesdays.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Because I almost forgot to vote in the special election for Congress, which was on a Thursday. But that's a different matter entirely.
All right.
Okay,
Matt,
we're gonna
let's continue, Matt.
Yeah, we have a few questions from Stacey Tavel. Question 1, did any commissioners have hesitation about private citizens initiating ordinances or issuing a referendum? How do you predict our very divided community will function Faulkner style?
Can I take this one? Let me start off with this one. I think this is one of the big fear-mongering tactics. There's this sort of allegation by those opposing this referendum that hey, the ability to have referendum and initiatives are going to cause the citizens to take over and it's going to be a mess and all this kind of stuff. And special interests are going to come in because they're going to support referendums. Let me ask you something logically for those listening. No, let me set the framework for you. In order to have a referendum on the ballot and passed, here's what has to happen. You have to get 15% of the votes cast in the last municipal election of the General Assembly. So if you first have to have an issue and then put it forth and get 15% of those who voted in the last General Assembly election to favor it. It then goes onto a ballot the next year. So the next year, a majority of the voters have to vote in favor of it. And so it's a 2-year process requiring signatures, requiring 50% of the vote initially, requiring a majority vote afterwards. So that seems like a fairly onerous task. Conversely, under our current system, where the parties select candidates to sit on the committee, the parties can figure out who might be more easily manipulated, have less experience, who might be more willing to listen to them, and special interests. And they say, okay, we're going to choose this person to run for election, and they just get elected. So you tell me which system is more easily prone to special interests and private citizens running amok. One that would require a 15% vote of those who voted in the last election just to get on a ballot, and then a year later, a majority vote, or allowing two parties to unilaterally decide who gets the party nomination and then get on the township committee and can make any decision they want.
And then I will say not only of that, then the majority of that TC can make that change, right?
Yeah. Look, the reality is this isn't a hypothetical. Those who are saying that this is an issue have not cited a single instance of other towns where this has happened. But I can cite towns that the partisan elections have led to special interests, specifically Millburn Township, because as I said earlier in one of my opening comments, a former party mayor, party affiliate who was on the township committee, and in fact, mayor has already published a public letter disclosing the party pressure and the political pressure that she was under, and that is why she left the party for a period of time.
Well, look, I think the heart of this question is direct democracy versus representative democracy, right? And there are pros and cons of both. This has been discussed from the time the Federalist Papers were written. This is an old historic debate question. This was also debated when the legislature passed the Faulkner Act. And there are built-in protections from the abuse of direct democracy that's implied by this question. The built-in protections result from the process, as Corey was saying. You got to get 15% of the voters on board with physical signatures, submit that to the clerk, get that certified. And if we are opposing an ordinance the township council passed, you have to do it within 20 days. So there are process-related protections to make sure that it's not an abuse of direct democracy. And you have to recognize that the act provides this as a standard with those protections in place. So it's not about an abuse of majority rights or the minority losing out or anything like that. This is well structured to give us an option to stop egregious actions if there is widespread community support for it.
Yeah, I think it provides for actually more accountability on large issues. If there is an issue that people are so passionate about that they're able to get 15% to put it on a ballot and a majority a year later to vote it through, I think that'd probably be a big issue for the town. And so it does allow for more accountability. I think generally regarding the Faulkner Act form of government, I feel that the community will function more harmoniously under it. If we can have less politically charged elections, more qualified candidates, which would also reduce the need or likelihood of the use of referendum, I just think there'd be more harmony under this form of government.
And can I add that the power is restricted to only legislative actions or inactions by the council. You cannot question administrative decisions. You cannot question the budget. You cannot question the bond issuances through this process. It's a separate law that relates to bond issuances. So there's a lot of built-in protection that we know existed, and that's why we were comfortable with giving this power to the community. It's better for accountability. Accountability doesn't mean that let somebody make a bad decision and then vote them out. Accountability means having a way to put a check on that decision. Anyways,
great. Another question for Stacy. What are the potential financial risks of letting private citizens have control of town spending?
This question itself is wrong because private citizens do not have control of town spending. As I said,
I was wondering about it's based on a false premise.
The budget process is outside of being challenged. It's an administrative decision the council would be making, and you cannot challenge a budget decision through the Faulkner Act. I would, if any lawyers are listening, I would love to be fact-checked on this because this is a fascinating topic for me.
All right, next one. In hindsight, do you have regrets about the process in general? Are there ways the process could have been less divisive? I know you didn't design the process, but what are your thoughts? How could have Millburn approached improving our government in a more productive way?
Can I start with that answer and then you guys chime in?
Yeah.
I don't feel the process was divisive. I think at the moment, people making, like comments from the vote yes, vote no, that's divisive, but the process certainly was never divisive. We didn't agree with each other, and people could look online. The only one meeting, we had two town people, disagree and one misbehaved. That was the only part that might have felt divisive, but that wasn't the process. That was one meeting that, things went south for a minute. But
I think conversely, actually, the process was very inclusive. We interviewed elected officials from both parties dating back to 1991. We held 18 open public meetings that anyone could have attended and shared their perspective in order to help what the ultimate report that we put forward. So I think maybe this stage, and so the vote has become divisive because, in my opinion, a self-interested organization whose members, by the way, intentionally chose not to attend and contribute to the process are now coming out with bald allegations and baseless fear mongering. Contrary to our study, which is fact-based, it has statistics. You can read it. It has examples. It's all open to the public view. Those pushing the no agenda are spending tens of thousands of dollars without citing any specific instances. They're just making allegations of, oh, this process was divisive, or, citizens are going to control the budget. But they're not putting anything behind it. They're not giving examples of where this happened in towns. The only place that, we've seen an example is they're giving Trenton, Jersey City, and they're not tying it to the form of government. They're just putting allegations out there to scare people. So I challenge people to really question sort of the bald allegations that are out there and ask for facts. Read both statements, read the facts behind it, because I would say that this process has only become divisive because the no group intentionally chose not to contribute to the process, to the ultimate outcome, and waited until a report was done to now hire a public relations firm and a political consultant. They're spending tens of thousands of dollars. Take a look at that. Ask yourself, does that make any sense?
Well, and think about it. We also had some of the best legal counsel guiding us. We chose attorneys who had experience with charter studies. We wanted to make sure, we did interview somebody else who was local, and we just felt like to have somebody guiding us who has real experience and giving us good advice was.
Our goal was to have as much input from as many sources as possible. I asked certain people that I knew to be, who are now on the no side, I specifically asked them face to face, can you please come to meetings? We're having a meeting on this day, on this day. Each of them said to me, sure, absolutely, but never came to the meetings. And I would have liked them to have participated. They could have helped shape the ultimate outcome, and maybe there wouldn't have been this much division on the vote if they actually came to the public meetings and helped contribute to it.
Well,
actually
go ahead. Sorry, John.
I'm sorry, Shanaf. You go ahead.
I was going to say disagreements doesn't mean divisiveness, right? I think there have been some healthy questions that have come through all the public engagement we have had. Why didn't you choose a direct mayor? Healthy question. Why did you choose June 16th as a date? A very valid question. Why are you going from 5 to 7 members? Again, very question that we should explain, and the report kind of goes into all of that. But then the fear mongering is where I think the feeling of divisiveness comes in. Hey, we're just gonna not be able to function with the initiative and referendum acts. Doesn't happen that way, right? You guys had a preordained result and you didn't make a sincere effort to study the issues. Well, going into this, I didn't even know that most people feel the 3-year term, or the annual election cycle rather, not the term, is an issue. I didn't even know that fact, right? How could I have made a conclusion preordained of something I wasn't aware about? So anyways, look, disagreements are healthy for the community. We should talk them out and ultimately have the ballot box decide where we stand as a community. The divisiveness comes from personal attacks. It comes from baseless arguments, not rooted in fact. And look, some of that's going to happen. We just have to come together at the end of it and know that our futures are tied together to the future of this town and behave accordingly. But it's not been a bad process. I'm very proud of the process, and there's nothing I regret about it.
Right, and I think if you look at the faces on the screen, you'll see that we're pretty hardworking individuals in the community, and our actions speak much louder even than our words, because you think about how many years, how few or how many years all of us in this elected group of 5 people have served our community, raised money for our community. So to be accused of being bamboozled and having foregone conclusions before we even started, that's the part that feels, divisive now, but the process certainly wasn't, the process to getting here. The past few weeks might have been a bit divisive because of the personal, things that are made up about us that are not true. But, I think the process was good. I wish we had folks showing up who are on the no campaign now not, not thinking that we just made a foregone conclusion. I wish they'd come through to listen to us.
Some people show up and ask questions about, especially when the partisan, non-partisan question was being discussed in public. We did have some people show up, but a vast majority did not, and I wish they had. But look,
I just want to wrap this question up by saying that the divisiveness is a choice that some people have made, to lob smears and baseless accusations at people to undermine, which is just distracting from actually having an argument or having a discussion about the points of the recommendation on its merits, right? And so, I don't think the process was divisive. I think we were as inclusive as possible. We had all of our sessions recorded, remote participation via Zoom, public comment, which goes way above and beyond what the process itself actually requires in the Open Public Meetings Act.
This is Chris Drucker. I also do not have any regrets. Dr. Khan and myself, we went to Verona. We spent 6 hours there. We talked to the mayor. We talked to the librarian. We talked to Christine Gotti's counterpart. Jerry knows this, but I really educated myself on this process. And, the interviews that we did, folks, were genuine. And I have absolutely no regrets about the process.
I actually loved the interviews the most. I felt like I learned so much about people's experiences who work for the town, people who serve for the town in ways that, even as a volunteer for as many years I've been working with, in town hall for a gazillion years on Rocktoberfest and, all the other events that we put on, I just didn't understand how much work went into what our, township employees, I knew they were hardworking, but all of a sudden you're like, wow, they care. They love this, this town. And the TC interviews were fascinating. I learned a lot. And it was not, there was no reason to go through them if there was a foregone conclusion. You know what I mean?
I'm glad you brought that up, Jonah. Some interviews actually changed my mind because as we were going through this and I was looking at all the different options available to us, I was thinking, hey, direct mayor makes sense.
Oh, I think we all want a directly elected mayor.
And then I heard some people argue against it. And I was like, you know what? I was totally wrong about this. I think it's
vehemently argue. And also business administrators in other towns, or rather the council manager form of it, we're saying, who worked in many other towns, we're saying, be careful what that position will make people feel, that person is falsely in power. And we never wanted to recommend a strong mayor, so it would be a weak mayor anyway. So they would, casting their vote the same as everybody else on, either side of them. But that directly elected mayor was really something that I think we all had hoped we would be able to do. And in the future, if somebody wants it, they can certainly introduce that, right? It's
after 4 years, I think, but yes, we can.
Only if yes passes.
Only if yes. It's not even an option under the current form. So
yeah, that's right.
There's one more point.
I think we addressed that. So maybe we move on to another question.
Let's move on. Yeah.
One last one. Are you all voting yes for your recommendations? Is there anything that you would have changed about the final result?
I stand by our recommendation, and I am absolutely voting yes. It's based on rigor, over 100 hours of interviews with different parties, residents, council members, past and present, both parties, other townships, both political participants from both parties and other townships. It was a thorough, well-rounded, well-reasoned recommendation. So there is nothing that I would change in that report, and I am voting yes.
This is Chris Drucker. I also am voting yes for all the statements that Corey Biller just said.
Can I just say same and not elongate this? So yes.
Yes, I am voting yes.
I'm definitely voting yes. I think if there was anything to change, it's not from us. It's more from the structure of this whole thing is, could we have given the public a menu of options to say, vote check mark next to each one of our recommendations? I wish we could have done that, but
the law doesn't permit that. Yeah.
We can't do it.
The law doesn't. I asked the question, Joanna, if you remember, hey, can we break this up into 2 questions?
Yes.
And we were said, no, we cannot do that. we had to have only one question asked to the public, and that's not about. I think the question is about what could we have changed within our control. We could
Within
not.
our control, right? And we couldn't have changed that. But that's one thing I would have liked to have had, to give the public a chance to check mark each one.
I also don't want to claim that we did a perfect job, right? There could be holes people point out, and there could be things we could have done better. If it's valid to feel that, but we did the best we could unequivocally.
Okay, I've got a question for Steve Quirk. How do you feel the current structure has affected the ability to get positive things done in town so far?
I mean, I think one of the things we heard loud and clear was from both residents, current council members, former council members, other employees, is the township administrator role is something that has worked very well for the last 40 years in our town, and that is one of the reasons why we went with this form of government, is to protect that role. We said earlier, it's changing name. It's going to be council manager. It's going to township manager, but the function itself has been operating so well and has sort of helped and been such an asset to our town that's something we wanted to protect, and that's part of our recommendation.
And let me also add this. I was on the committee for the Taylor Park Gateway, where the gazebo is, folks. So we had, I forget, we had 5, 6, 7 people on the committee, and we voted to hire a agricultural architect. And I went in front of the township committee back then, and to hire this firm, we needed $160,000. All 5 of them raised their hand. Let's do it, okay? And then what happened after that? All the no people came out. And so you know what happened? It was abandoned. And you talk about wasted money, 160 grand down the tubes.
I think the current structure is making it difficult for long-term planning. I think a lot of the annual election cycle and the turnover makes it so that, projects that really need to get done don't get done in time. If anyone's been
in them, Jerry, I think that's the other thing. We found out that people don't want to champion them when they are like, if you need a champion on the township committee, right, to get a project moving forward. So you have to rah for the Rose Garden to be improved, or streets, or whatever it is. And if you don't have someone rah-rahing, you're working into an election cycle, people are afraid to put their stamp of approval. Like, I'm pro this new version of complete streets or something, because I'm going to be elected or not elected based on how I choose to make this vote happen. So giving people a longer term, we felt like it just gave them more incentive to stick with the program, do right by the community rather than do right by their campaign.
Joanna, talk about how when we interviewed the chief, the battalion chief of the fire department, what the women have to do, our women firefighters. Right.
So our
this was eye-opening.
Right. Very eye-opening. The fire department now has women working in the building, but when it was first constructed, it was really all men. There were not women secretaries. There were not women firefighters. There was nobody in charge, no women in charge at all. So the building was built almost like a dormitory. And so we have female firefighters. We have women who work in the building. There are no women's restrooms. And it's basically, you have to think of the fire department as the fire building as a hotel. Fire people who protect us from fires sleep in those buildings. So there are women sleeping next to men with a shower curtain in between, and there's no place for women to go to the bathroom without privacy. So just an interesting thing that we learned, and we realized that needs a champion.
One last thing about town hall, which was being contemplated for 20 plus years. If anyone sat through a township committee meeting, you'll know that township committee room was falling apart to the point where I think it was the heat was blasting because there's no insulation upstairs. And that building was on its last legs. There was so many decades of deferred maintenance. And that's just one of those things that, like, if no one's there to champion, it's just going to get ignored.
Okay, I got a question from Sam Schmidt. What is the number of signatures necessary for the initiatives and for referendum? Is there any funding available for that? How much will it cost Millburn to verify signatures and have an election? Will the town council be allowed to spend money supporting its position and opposing the initiative or referendum?
So let me.
So
Okay, I was just going to say, because I was talking about the referendum earlier and initiative. I think I understand the question, but I'll just do it quick, and then Jerry, you can chime in. But like I sort of talked about earlier, that getting a referendum or initiative on the ballot and ultimately getting it passed is very onerous. And I think it's intentionally onerous to protect against random citizens controlling government for minute matters. It requires signatures from 15% of the votes cast in the municipality during the last election for members of the General Assembly. And then, like I said, the measure has to then get a majority of the votes in a general election. So it's I hope that answers at least part of the question as to how many signatures and things like that.
And just to give a sense of an actual number, I think that would be about 1,200 people currently, because I think there were 8,000 voters in last year's General Assembly election. There is no funding mechanism for people gathering signatures. And let me just re-emphasize how difficult it is to collect 1,200 signatures. I think that would take many, many people many weeks of time to do it. The clerk's office is responsible for validating the signatures. There's no cost to that validation. If it goes on a general election ballot, there's no cost to have the election. And the TC cannot spend money advocating a position. That's just like how the Township Committee can't spend money advocating a position on this referendum. But if you want to know all of the details, speak to an attorney and refer to NJSA 40:69A-184 and subsequent for full details.
Wow.
Yes, for those of you who are taking notes, that's 40:69A-184. All right. Okay, the next question. The no side has said that council members would reestablish boards with their own appointments. Can you explain that?
Can I take that one, or does somebody else want to take it?
I can start it if somebody wants to chime in and correct me. This is a standard orderly transition. Each year, there's already board and commission positions that the new majority either appoints or reappoints. Any majority on the existing committee can already remake boards. We've seen it. And ironically, this is one of the things the no people gripe about. I think the real objection is this. They don't trust that 7 people elected under a nonpartisan, free and fair election would have better judgment than 5 people selected under a closed-door partisan process. I mean, I trust that our elected officials will do the right thing for Millburn, especially when they're untethered to any outside politicians or political affiliations and are beholden to folks who are in our county, taking a peek at what we're doing.
So I think this question is referring to something called the clean slate rule, right? Because remember, we are going to have a new charter. So everything that we did before that has to either be redone under the new charter. And why would you not trust the 7 elected representatives to pick from people who volunteer to continue to serve in the commissions they are in? Why would you not pick them and continue? We have a good planning board right now, and there are members from there who probably want to continue serving, and they'll submit the application, and those 7 elected members are going to represent us and make a decision. So I don't know why that's such a big deal. And there are provisions within the law for a 90-day transition period such that regular business is not impacted. So anyways, that's some expansion to what you said, Joanna.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that one? Because I think there might have been confusion for people, like they just think everyone's getting replaced anew, right?
I think the other part of this question is trying to fearmonger in terms of like, oh, there's going to be like completely different volunteers on all of our boards and commissions. if we can get more people to volunteer to be able to completely remake all the boards and commissions, I wouldn't know what to say, because my understanding is it is sometimes very difficult to find people to serve on these boards and commissions. And I highly, highly doubt that all of them are all of a sudden going to, like, people are going to start volunteering that can put their names in previously. I don't know. It just seems a little outlandish to me. But again, like, this is something that you should ask the people running for council, how they would make boards and appointments. And, I don't think it should be something that is used to fearmonger. I like to think of, well, yeah, I don't think it should be something that should be used to fearmonger.
I could let me.
I have
I
one
could
thing to say
attest to
before you
I
start.
could attest
I have
to
one thing to
Jerry.
say. I have one thing to say before you start, Chris.
All
Whoever
right.
is listening and intends to run, if you win, can you make sure Chris Drucker is on the rec commission? I don't want him out of it. Anyway, sorry, Chris.
So I've been a recreation commissioner since 2006. Okay, and I run the concerts in town. I do the 4 miler. I do the fishing derby. Blah blah blah. We are always looking for volunteers. So to say that people will not volunteer, we want people to volunteer, and to say that we're going to change all the boards is freaking ridiculous. So thank you.
All right, next question. How will the changes proposed to our local government benefit the Millburn residents, property owners, businesses, and taxpayers in the next decade, in your opinion?
Well, I think the fundamental change we're affecting is going to encourage a wider pool of more qualified candidates to run for township council now. So that in itself hopefully will lead to better governance outcomes. Nobody can assure better governance outcomes, right? It's based on people ultimately and the decisions they make. But we can have a system that encourages a wider qualified pool of candidates, and hence hope for better governance outcomes. So
Sorry, go ahead.
I was done, Corey. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think the simple fact of having elections every other year, I think, will help this township. We have seen the toxicity in national elections and what happens in national elections that has unfortunately spilled over into our local township. We could help that by having elections every other year, so at least their scabs can form a little bit. Again, also nonpartisan will help that, because now you're not having the toxicity of the national partisan issues that are going on infect our local elections. Sure, we might have discussions and debate, but hopefully those discussions and debate are about substance and rigor and what's important for our towns, and not things that are irrelevant from our towns, but that are important because of national topics. I mean, I can go on. I can say that. Look, I do think a 7-member council is better than a 5, because, look, I've worked on various committees in this town. I've worked with the township administrator. I've worked with council members. I can see how overworked they are, and I think we'll probably it'll be people can focus more diligently if they're sharing the work. And I think that also will encourage more people to raise their hand to want to run for council positions, because, look, a lot of people, not a lot of people, what am I saying? Most people have day jobs. This is not a day job. Unlike those who serve in the cities that were given in examples before, like Jersey City, Newark, Trenton, and all those towns, those are paid elected positions. Those are career politicians. Here, these are just residents that are volunteering their time, and it's intimidating. If you know that you're going to spend or have to spend 20 plus hours a week engaging in this volunteer activity, when you have things to do for your family and your kids, you're less likely to contribute. But if you can share that wealth amongst 2 other people and pull that burden down, we likely will get more people participating. And the more people who participate, we get more diversity of ideas and better outcomes.
I think an underappreciated point is how much overhead the municipal staff have to go through each year onboarding new people. Every single, because there's an election every single year, and more often than not, recently, we don't see all of the same people get reelected serving multiple terms. That means that the clerk and the business administrator each year have to bring new people up to speed. And, because it's a five-member council, if you're bringing one or two people up to speed, that really hinders the amount of time you have to govern. And so, I think the four-year term and the elections every other year will really help to be able to give our governing body a chance to focus and think more long-term.
All right, thanks, guys. All right, one more question. When my neighbors were talking about the referendum, they see no downside to adopting these changes. Are they right? What really are the no people making a fuss about?
I don't see any downside, to be honest. We debated this a lot. This is what people don't appreciate enough is this really is taking how we have functioned in the past and continuing it. The business administrator ordinance was mirroring the council manager system. We are continuing that part and making the changes we can through the Faulkner Act, right? We're adding two more members because you can't do it under the current township committee form of government we have. We are having a four-year term and moving from an annual election cycle to two-year election cycle. We cannot do it under the current form we have. So we are taking what has worked for us and improving it around the edges to make sure it works better for us. So I don't know what fuss they're making about it. You should go and ask them to defend their positions.
Yeah,
I
too.
also see I also see no downside. Folks, we have so much untapped talent in this town, and going to 7 people on a council. Oh my word! I mean, we have CEOs, CIOs, CFOs. We have hedge fund managers. We have private equity guys. Oh my word! This could be freaking phenomenal. So please forget the fear mongering out there, and look at our answers and look at the facts, please. Joanna, I think you want to say something.
No, I think you covered.
Yeah, I would say, look, I agree. I don't, at this point, I look, this was, like we said, it's highly researched. Chris said that. I think the recommendations are sound and based in fact. And the reality is it's not etched in stone. Unlike our current form of government, which is etched in stone, if we find that there's some significant downside to what we're proposing, most of it can be tweaked and adjusted.
And you know what, I will chime in here because I've chimed in before about this specific topic. I know that 1,200 sounds like an onerous number, but if the town folk, when it comes time, when we're allowed to make that change, if people are unhappy with any one of these choices that we've made, and we found that, gosh, it's so hard to get, to get 7 people elected and we really can only get 5 and it's fine, it's too onerous that way, I'll get those signatures with you. I think any of the 5 of us, would stand behind what we're recommending. And if it doesn't work, we'd be the first to admit, oh gosh, this part of this transition didn't work. But we hope that at least most of it will work. And if there's one part that's not working, we will help get it changed.
No question. Yep.
All right, Kurt.
Matt,
Great.
Any other questions coming in, Matt?
Next one. Yeah, we got 2 more. Will this new form of government raise my taxes, or will it impact the schools?
I think that one's pretty quick. No and no.
And no.
I don't know how it would impact the schools at all. I don't see any even tangential connection. We're not recommending, and it's not part of the referendum, to change how the Board of Ed is elected, how it operates, and its interface with the government. As far as taxes, I think we've already touched on this. The taxes will not be impacted.
All right. Last question then. All right, this one's a bit long. Do you agree with the latest text that came out from the No campaign that stated, if you vote yes, then we will end up with rushed government change, dissolved committee and board committees, things are already too expensive and will become more expensive. There'll be chaotic change and higher taxes.
All right, so higher taxes, we already addressed, no, that there wouldn't be higher taxes. This process is governed by state law, so I don't think there'd be chaos at all. I think it's pretty scripted as to how things are done and what order they're done in, and so I think it would be an orderly transition. I have no reason to question the transition. We did talk about the committee reorganizations. It is true that the committees would have to be reorganized. Over the course of history, that's a routine activity, often to reconstitute some committees. Admittedly, this would be all the committees. It's my fervent belief that most of the committees will have substantially the same members at the end of the day after this. Maybe we'll get more participation, like Chris was alluding to. That'd be great if we got more participation, but I don't think this change would cause less participation, nor is there any asserted reason that the committees, that people appointed to committees would be based on any sort of special interest or anything other than the interest of Millburn Township. Nothing's been asserted. There are some, I guess, based on this question, bold allegations of it, but no construct that's been put forward as to why that would happen. What are the other parts of this question?
The rushed government change, I don't think anyone addressed that yet. I know we talked about it prior. So maybe this person who asked the question didn't hear us.
No, I mean, I don't think it was rushed. Look, our study, we were elected in November. We informally started studying it, quite frankly, once we were elected in November, and then came together as a team in January. We've had over 100 hours worth of interviews, public meetings, debates, and discussions. We've collaborated with legal professionals. We've drafted a report with appendices that's open to the public. So no, I think our analysis and our recommendation was very deliberate and thoughtful and took a lot of time.
Well, arguably, I think when we compared ourselves to other charter study commissions, while they may have taken longer, and we talked to our attorneys about this, they may have taken longer in terms of more months. They did not put in more hours than we did. So I think when it comes to the group that we have presented in front of in front of this Zoom meeting, I think the five of us take things very seriously, and I think we like to go ba 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 ba. We're very impatient people in terms of wanting to get answers. So I think we were very efficient in contacting the amount of people that we needed to contact to get the answers we were looking for that we didn't know prior to speaking to them. So I think we were learning very quickly. We moved through the process because we were ready to move on, not because we were trying to rush it. We just had the answers because we were already interviewing these people. And we had our meetings once a week rather than once every other week or once every 3 weeks. So I think the accelerated process has nothing to do with anything other than we took our jobs really seriously and wanted to get things done. And I personally was afraid of the summer months. People tend to go away and nothing gets done. So you tend to lose focus. People go on vacations. You have missed meetings. Who are we going to get here to come watch us from, the end of June through the beginning of September?
I think by saying rushed, I think the No campaign is really accusing us of being efficient, and I do not mind that accusation.
No, I think we're pretty hardworking and very efficient people.
Okay, so that's it for the questions. Thank you very much.
Matt, but before we go,
Corey, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a sort of just a parting comment. This is a very important election for Millburn. It's going to determine if we continue the status quo where local political parties are the gatekeepers of who governs, where the council, it has been demonstrated, is susceptible to special interest, which we've, like I said, experienced, and where the structure is outdated and inhibits the effectiveness of those governing and administering our town affairs. Our recommendation, unanimously put forth, was done after long and careful research and debate. It was done with input received from elected officials, municipal employees, residents, employees from similar municipalities, elected officials from similar municipalities. It is backed by research and specific examples. I urge everyone, please, when thinking about how you're going to vote, make your decision based on facts. Go with reason. Go with logic. Do not be fooled by bald, completely baseless fear-mongering that has not been supported with any examples or statistics. The organization behind the no vote has not disclosed who they are and has spent tens of thousands of dollars, which are publicly researchable, to oppose the referendum. They knew about each of our public meetings and intentionally chose not to attend or participate, which would have allowed them to help shape our recommendation. Please ask yourself why. Why would an organization, ironically calling for transparency, hide who they are while spending tens of thousands of dollars to oppose a recommendation that they intentionally chose not to help shape? When you're faced with frightening allegations, whether it's by text, emails, social media posts, mailers, think about all they're spending and what they're doing. Ask why. Ask for examples and compare it to our researched and thoughtful recommendation backed by examples and statistics. Each of us remain open to answer your questions openly and honestly and backed by facts and statistics. Please do your research. Think logically. We are always here for you through the vote. Please reach out if you want to.
Thank you, Corey. Matt?
Yeah, okay. All right. Great. Okay, so again, thank you for our questions tonight, and thank you to you, the commissioners, for 5 months of very hard work on behalf of this community. The special election, as everyone should remember, is going to be on Tuesday, June 16th. The polls will be open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. This is the only question on the ballot. They're really voting. Millburn Charter.org for more information. If you have any additional questions, you can email or call the commissioners using the contact information on the website. Thanks, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt.